Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 434 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is with Jenny Smith. Jenny and I are going to talk about long-acting insulin for those of you who are on MDI. So insulins like Levemir, Lantus, Tresiba, stuff like that. Long-acting, which Jenny corrects me about because I want to call it slow-acting. But Jenny is older, and she's had diabetes for a long time, so she remembers insulin that was slow-acting. Anyway, let's get started. My friend Jennifer Smith holds a bachelor's degree in human nutrition and biology from the University of Wisconsin. She is a registered and licensed dietitian, a certified diabetes educator, and a certified trainer on most makes and models of insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitoring systems. I didn't say the S the first time. And most, ready? Just pretend I can, and continuous glucose monitoring systems. She's on the show today to help me talk about long-acting insulin for people who are using multiple daily injections. Now, if you're pumping, we still we talk a little bit about the ideas of how basal insulin works and how to create coverage for different things. So I don't think the conversation wouldn't be valuable for you, but this one was definitely done with people who are injecting in mind. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. And after all this, if you'd like to contact Jenny, you can find her at her real job at integrateddiabetes.com. I'd like it if you could consider supporting the good work that's being done by the T1D Exchange. Your participation will take just a few minutes, but the impact of your kindness will last forever. Because the T1D Exchange is looking for type 1 adults and caregivers who are U.S. residents to participate in a quick survey that can be completed in just a few moments, right from your home, on your phone or your computer. And after you finish the questions, which are very simple, I think it took me maybe 6 or 7 minutes to do them, you'll be contacted annually after that just to see if there's any updates to your information. But other than that, there's nothing left for you to do. And this is 100% anonymous, completely HIPAA compliant, and it never requires you to have to see a doctor or go to a remote site. But it does allow you to help with the research being done around type 1 diabetes. The T1D Exchange is building the most robust type 1 diabetes data platform in the United States, and it's using it to drive meaningful research and innovation in treatment, prevention, and hopefully one day, a cure. With their partners, they work to increase patient access for care, resources, to promote education, and advocacy for policies that help the type 1 diabetes community. These things lead to better, longer lives for everyone living with type 1 diabetes. And if you can take the time to do it, please visit them at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Thank you very much. Jenny, I want to talk about slow-acting insulins for people using MDI. Because I always tell people that the main difference between pumping and not pumping is, well, if you're pumping, you don't have to inject yourself a bunch. And if you're pumping, you have access to extended bolus features and manipulating your basal insulin, from turning it off to temporarily putting it up or down. And to me, those are the real differences between pumping and MDI. I don't see a bunch of others.
The dose too, from the standpoint, right? I mean, in terms of especially little or really sensitive, if all you can do on MDI is half a unit, or if you've got really good eyeballs and on those half unit syringes, you can get a quarter of a unit, which can be done but it's not exact.
Right.
But I mean, if you're somebody that can take 0.05 or 0.1 and it turns things around for you, then MDI is not going to ever allow that.
Right. And then thinking specifically about being an MDI patient and your slow acting insulin. So let's list them, because I can do the old ones. Lantus, Levemir. I know Tresiba because people seem to love that, but there's another one, right?
Oh, so you mean long acting?
Yes. I call it slow acting. You call it long acting.
Yeah, it's long acting. And yeah, you're right. There's Lantus is old. Levemir
Yeah.
Toujeo.
Toujeo is the one I couldn't think
Tresiba.
of. Tresiba. Is there another?
And then there's also, Basaglar, essentially, which is like Lantus.
Okay.
Generic.
They changed okay.
Yeah. So those are the main long acting sort of 24, what they call 24-hour acting.
And if I put you in charge of the world and you had to give people long acting insulin, which brand would you give them?
Oh,
you should have saw the pressure on your face when you were given free reign over the world just now. You were like,
yes, it was. Oh gosh, I know. It's like being told that I get to be like controller of everything.
Yeah. Well, this one little thing,
just insulin. That's not as fun.
Yeah.
But I think that there are two. I wouldn't really only just pick one. If I had to only pick one, I'd probably pick Tresiba.
Okay.
Honestly, second in line, I would still go with the age-old Lantus.
Okay.
I really would. I think that Lantus Toujeo probably would be kind of like right with each other. And this is from both, like, this is professional opinion in terms of what I've seen with all the people that I've worked with. And then really fourth in line would really be more like a Levemir.
Okay. So,
I mean, by no means am I saying if you're on a Levemir and it's working for you, that it's bad or whatever. Again, your diabetes is what works.
Hey, listen, what works. That's no trouble at all.
Yeah.
What I started to run into, this is going back a long time. This is time machine going back. Arden's using, they started on Lantus. It burned her. We moved her to Levemir. Levemir didn't burn. We were all good. A little while into Arden's diabetes, I started seeing what I thought. It's funny now because people have glucose monitors and they're like, yeah, it's so obvious. But it wasn't obvious back then when I had a freestyle meter that looked like it came out of a bubblegum machine and a bunch of needles, Yes.
Yes.
And so I started thinking, I'm seeing Arden. Back then I thought of it as being insulin resistant, but her blood sugar's going up about 18 hours after I would inject her Levemir, right? And so I'm online trying to figure it out. And again, for people nowadays, online back then was not the same thing online now is. And I come across, Jenny, I've never told you this. I know I haven't because I've never said this on the podcast. I came across a web forum that should have been password protected that wasn't, where pharmaceutical salespeople talked to each other. Okay. So there's a bunch of
This was a long time ago.
This was a long time ago. I found this web board where pharmaceutical salespeople talk to each other. And I found a thread where they were lamenting that the slow acting insulin that they were selling doesn't always last 24 hours the way the label says it does. And
I would say that for that particular long acting, it's probably at least 90, if not more % of people cannot use it once a day.
And so that was a light bulb for me. And I was like, okay, well, then what? You know what I mean? Like, so now I'm sitting there by myself. I don't have a podcast I listen to or anything like that. I'm not reading anybody's blog. And I'm like, what do I do if it doesn't last 18 hours? And then I was like, what if I gave her some of it every 12 hours? And that's the first time I split Arden's Levemir. I couldn't get a doctor to tell me to do it. I couldn't get anybody to tell me to do it. And, so I started off with 50-50. If she was getting 4 units a day, excuse me. If she was getting 4 units a day, I put 2 in the morning, and 12 hours later, I put 2 more in. And then I started being like, like at night, she's staying stable, but during the day, she's a little high. So I was like, let me try 2.5 in the morning and then 2 at night. And I just kept messing with it until I got it, right? And it messes with your head a little bit when you first start it because you picture this 24-hour clock in your head and you're like, where do I stop it? And what's that going to do to success? And you worry so much about it when you go to do it.
Right.
But splitting that insulin absolutely was a game changer for Arden. And I want you to tell me how you talk to people about splitting. So, and you wouldn't split Tresiba, right? Because Tresiba actually seems like it makes it like 18 hours maybe, or day and a half.
Longer, actually. Tresiba, if you pull out like the pamphlet details and all that kind of stuff, it's a 24-hour acting insulin, but the action profile is a true 24 hours at a minimum, meaning many people know that it does last longer than that, 30 hours, 36 hours, which also in terms of like dosing allows a little bit of leeway. Let's say you were always really strategic about making sure you took whatever basal, let's say it was Levemir once a day or Lantus once a day at like 10 p.m. And it had to be 10 p.m. every night, or you noticed like you did that after that, it was just all out of luck because it was gone or it was dissipating.
Right.
Not so much with Tresiba. You could have leeway on erring on the side of later. If 10 p.m. was your dose, but you didn't get to it until midnight, for the most part, you could be pretty okay, or you would be pretty okay being sort of delayed in getting to taking it.
Okay.
But that's not really the case with like your Lantuses and your Levemirs. So for splitting like a Levemir in terms of what we usually do, when it's really evident in data, kind of like you were following, even with the sort of rudimentary stuff you had to analyze.
Piece of paper and a pen and this little, I wish you could all see the meter. It was just like, it felt like it was going to fall in half sometimes.
Yes, like plastic. Yeah. Very. I mean, they're all plastic, but like this was really like.
Not like that. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, we look at data and we say, okay, this is clearly not serving you well. In fact, a good like basal sort of evaluation on like a Levemir would be when you dose it and you think you've got the time zone where it's dissipating in use, just don't bolus and eat after that and see what happens to your blood sugar.
Right.
That's a really good way to analyze about the stoppage point, which then would give you more detail to splitting it. And we do still try to do about a 12 and 12 in terms of hours in, break. So morning 6 a.m., evening 6 p.m. or whatever you want to do like that. We start with a 50-50 unless there's very definitive data, again, that shows a time period of the day with a lot more sensitivity and a time period where there's a lot more resistance. So let's say once we start splitting with 50-50, the overnights are like, God, you're dropping. I got to feed. And where in the daytime you need more, like you saw, right? So then we would really probably do more like a 75-25 kind of thing, more in the daytime, less in the evening, or opposite, maybe less in the daytime and more in the overnight, especially if growth is a potential issue or there's stuff that's causing rises overnight. So the breakdown, we start with 50-50 and then we go ahead with looking at records to see how to adjust it.
Yeah. And this, again, to be clear, this isn't something you would do with anything other than Lantus or Levemir.
Correct. And for the most part, even Lantus, most people don't really need to split Lantus like that. I've had in little doses, sometimes it becomes necessary because the smaller the dose, the less lengthy the extension of use to a true 24-hour.
Gotcha.
The same thing with a baseline basal insulin. That's a very large dose. We see large being more than about 40 units at an injection point. While you might take it once a day, 8 p.m. at night, anything more than about that 40 units in one pop, we split into 2 injections.
Gotcha.
If you're taking 60 units, 30 units in one hip, 30 units in the other hip or butt or leg or wherever you're kind of putting it, because that big depot under the skin, it's a lot.
Right. Is it true that those insulins go under the skin and they crystallize and they kind of melt away? Is that the functionality of it, or am I wrong about that?
I guess in terms of chemistry, that's kind of a way to look at how it doesn't get all absorbed like our rapid acting insulins do, like, quite right away or so to speak. It forms more of like a solid, like crystal, I guess.
Yeah. And then it just sort of gets used slowly.
That's not a bad way to describe it.
Thank you. I made that up years ago for the podcast or for the blog. And I just couldn't, I was trying to explain it to somebody one day. I'm like, just imagine it goes inside. It kind of isn't liquid anymore. And then it just slowly kind of melts away and gets used up over time. It's time release.
Like throwing hot water into the air on a really freezing cold day, it crystallizes and then.
I probably could have just said time release now that I'm thinking of it, but
well,
then we wouldn't.
The visual is more fun.
Yeah, it is more fun that way. So the reason I bring all this up is because watching people manage with MDI and getting this in their head that, hey, I put that in, now that's gone. I don't have to think about that anymore. Like it's just another avenue for me to watch people underrepresent how important their basal insulin is. And I guess then if I'm telling you what the real difference between pumping and not pumping is the ability to change your basal on the fly day after day or segment after segment is kind of huge. Now, I'm not a big proponent of having like 1,000 basal programs. I try to keep them pretty close and manage everything else with boluses. But there just can be no doubt, especially if you're a hormonal person, a woman who gets her period, or little kids who are growing. I'm watching at times, like I'm something that's a little exasperated right now and kind of blown up to make the point, but Arden is trying birth control pills to regulate her period. So poor Arden's period is not great. It literally doesn't stop. Like in the last 60 days, Arden, she hasn't had 4 periods, but she's had 4 episodes of bleeding that have lasted at least 11 days. So she gets 11 days, a 5-day break, and it comes right back again, right? So we're trying to regulate it with the birth control, not
which
the
a lot of women do that.
Please, whatever works, whatever makes her feel better, I'm good with. But the point is that we introduced more hormones into her body, and I watch her basal needs change significantly. And I think, what would another person do? Like, what do people do when they're on MDI and they're shooting 5 units in the morning and that works for them, right? And then all of a sudden something happens that puts their need up. It's like the last thing they would think to do is give themselves more basal if they were on MDI, I think they'd be like injecting, trying to stop highs and everything and just think, oh, why am I getting high? Diabetes, instead of that.
You adjust the dose. Essentially on MDI, which is what I had to do in terms of the same scenario as Arden when I was on MDI and I had my period. I had to take about 20 to 25% more insulin in the days before it started,
right? In
order to calm down the impact of those hormones.
Oh, 100%. Like but here's what I see the fear from people, which I don't not understand. How do they know how much? Because once they put it in there, it's in there, right? When I do it with a pump, I just go, I don't know, turn it up to this. If that didn't work, a little more. Was that too much? Take it away. But once you make the decision, I usually get 5, I'm going to put in 7. You can't take it out again. It's in there. And that's got to be the piece that stops people from making the adjustments. Don't you think? Like that's the fear part that gets to them.
Yes.
Yeah. But
I mean, and in general,
necessary.
Depending on why you think the increase is coming, there's a general idea of about how much you might need more. So for a woman, again, in that time of the month, typically somewhere between about 20 to 40% more baseline insulin is needed to calm the impact of those normal monthly hormones that are cycling.
Yeah.
For things like an illness, like a nasty cold or whatnot, most people need at least 25% more insulin on a basal level for an illness. So having some parameters to start with for known situations can help give you, I guess, a math equation to figure out how much more to add in this scenario.
Right.
If it's just like, oh, today I'm running higher, I wonder if it's going to happen tomorrow. You need a little bit more data than just today. You can't be like, oh, I'm running, 70 points higher. I'm going to add 4 more units to my Lantus dose tonight. That helps it. That's not what I would recommend doing.
Yeah. But you have to incrementally move. And
Correct.
It's just, I feel for people who have that, well, once it's in there fear. Because I remember the first time somebody showed me an insulin pump, the first thing I thought was, I can manipulate basal insulin. That was my most excited idea about pumping. I'm sure Arden did like not getting shots, but that's what I was thinking about. Right. And it just, so you might need to split Levemir. You don't think you'd need to split Lantus. Tresiba can last much, much longer. So it's on a different cycle. Here's a really out of left field question that maybe you're going to tell me I'm an idiot on. But now that we had this conversation, I started thinking, instead of splitting the Levemir, should I have just shot less every 18 hours? Would that have worked in that scenario?
if you gave less in an 18-hour time period,
would it have made it as far? Maybe not. Maybe I would have to shoot the same amount every 18
Correct.
hours.
Right.
But see, back then I didn't think about, and this is kind of the next little bit I want to talk about here, and I'm going to keep it all as one episode. Back then I wasn't thinking about timeline. So we've talked about it before, but I kind of segment Arden's management in my mind into timelines. So there's a 24-hour timeline that I step back and look at. That to me is how I figure out basal and where I see whether or not I've pre-bolused well or chosen the amount of insulin for food well. But then I also think of timelines of meals. So in terms of how long is food going to be in her system and where is it impacting her along the way? And so there are times that I change the impact of the insulin through the timeline of the meal. That's just sort of how I think about it. So there's a bigger timeline that's 24 hours. Then there's a smaller timeline that to me begins with a pre-bolus and then any kind of fat or protein rise that I'm going to see. And then when the insulin's out of her. Those are sort of the two kind of ways that I think about it. And just now while we were talking, I thought, I wonder if I couldn't have manipulated that basal insulin instead of thinking of Arden as a 24-hour timeline. What would have happened if I thought of it as like a shorter one?
Every 18. And I think in hindsight, and that's the reason I didn't kind of comment on doing that because it becomes a little bit harder then because that 18 hours is always changing the time of 18 hours. Right. I mean, if you're going from taking it at 6 o'clock in the morning, 18 hours from there.
Would I really even think to do it then?
Would you even think, I mean, you'd have to, if you really did think it was definite 18 hours and the dose was right, because the time in that 18 hours was spent in target along with the boluses and everything was jiving the way that it was supposed to. It was after 18 hours that everything went sort of kapooey.
Yeah.
Then sure, you could dose every 18 hours, but then you really have to be on top of setting a reminder that says, this is 18 hours, this is time to dose.
Yeah. It doesn't lend to what I'm saying, doesn't lend to the idea that time is kind of artificial. Like you don't realize that till you really think about it. Like you're just running your life by a clock because we've all agreed to do it. Right. And so, and I'm thinking of it as a person who pumps insulin into his daughter, not as a person who shoots it anymore. Like, would I really think to, like you said, 7 a.m. would turn it into what, like 1 a.m. or something like that? Like, would I be like, hey,
right.
Probably not.
Right.
But it was an interesting kind of like exercise to consider just now. Like I'm not saying you should do it. I've never done it. I can't stand behind this idea at all. It just kind of popped into my head as we were talking about it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So when you're using Tresiba as example, your timeline, your macro timeline isn't even 24 hours. It's longer than that, but you still shoot it every 24 hours.
You still give it every 24 hours. Exactly. Which again, in terms of use, I don't have a good amount of people who are using it because the majority of people just don't want to stay on MDI so long anymore. They just don't. I've had 2 in the past year women that I've worked with through pregnancy who were MDI and did it through pregnancy, and they were actually Levemir users.
Okay.
Because it seemed to actually work better in terms of that dosing adjustment strategy.
Gave you more flexibility too.
It gave more flexibility.
Gotcha. How often do those people's levels change? Like how often is their Levemir going up or down? Frequently?
Specifically in pregnancy?
Yeah, those two.
Oh yeah.
A lot?
A lot through the whole pregnancy.
All right. Now this is, you're losing me. I've lost the ability to make eye contact with Jenny while I'm talking now. Jenny's the only person I look at while I'm talking, but I'm so far in my own head thinking about like different timelines and overlays of insulin and everything. Like and I know that sounds like probably nerdy and too deep, but I didn't know you could be nerdy about using insulin, but I'm now learning it's possible that I am. And so,
yes.
But there's a way to layer it on there that creates all of that. And even thinking about that Tresiba piece, like really think about that for a second. You shoot it every 24 hours, but it lasts longer than 24 hours, meaning that somehow when you initially shoot it, it's got some sort of a ramp up period that's because the beginning of the new shoot and the end of the old shoot are working together.
Kind of overlapping.
And then there's a middle section where the new shoot is the only thing happening. And then the new shoot leaves a tail that you overlap with. Oh, that's good. I love that. Yeah. I don't know why I like that.
And in fact, from the couple of people I've worked with Traceba, one of the times of day that most people have trouble with, of course, is the morning, right? Fasting time, breakfast time. So if you're taking your Traceba in the morning, you have a potential for actually improvement in the aftermath of like a breakfast, because you have that, if there is for you, that like window of time where you've got the new one going in and ramping up and the old one still potentially dissipating out. So a bit of a layering effect there.
I was talking to someone recently and I said, look, you don't have to do this. And I was like, and I'm not saying you should, but I'm wondering if I was you, would it be interesting to get up every night just for a week at 3 a.m. and shoot your long-acting insulin then to see if that quells the feet on the floor and the rise in the morning? Because you're getting up, all this is hitting you. That insulin goes in, it's not working yet. But what if you just, and I was like, obviously it's not a long-term fix, but if you were on a pump, I would say to you, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I think you should ramp your basal up to get ahead of this thing. I was like, I wonder what would happen. I wonder if that person ever did that.
And they were MDI.
Yeah, they were MDI.
Okay.
I was like, just try it for a week to see what happens. Like set the injection up, put it off to the side of the bed, set an alarm,
instead
wake
of 6
up,
a.m., 3 a.m.
and then shut your eyes and go back to sleep and see what happens. I was like, just for an experiment, but you know,
I think that's actually kind of one of the reasons that it's really hard for me to sleep in, because from when I was diagnosed, I mean, I had really, really old insulin. I mean, I had what was L insulin, the cloudy mix it up, with regular insulin. And that was even more than our current long-acting insulins. That was very much, you were on a time schedule. Yeah. It was take it at this time, eat at this time, have snacks at this time, because this is the action profile of the insulin. You have to meet it with food correctly.
Yeah, there's no other option. So you think to this day you can't sleep in because you're used to getting up to give yourself insulin?
I really think that's it. I mean, in high school, and then in college, I mean, I kind of offset it in a way. I never didn't take my insulin on time, but I would set the alarm, get up, take my basal insulin, and then I just go back to sleep. I mean, once I was on like a Lantus, I didn't necessarily do that with my L, or my Lente was what it was called, and my regular, because I mixed those in a syringe. So I didn't ever do that. But I did do that with Lantus, because I was like, I want to sleep in. So I would take it and then go back to sleep.
I have to tell you, this pandemic lockdown stuff, I have lost all semblance of understanding of what time means. Nothing matters anymore. It doesn't matter. Like the other night, it was last night, I was putting a podcast together and I got done, put it online. I was like, I'm going to watch TV. I looked up and I'm like, it's midnight. Like, what am I doing? It didn't even matter. We're eating at odd times a day. No one cares. No one knows what day it is. It's like,
I know if I didn't have a calendar to go by every single day, I wouldn't remember what day of the week it was either.
Well, who would even know? Like I'm almost been in the house for like the rest of us. I think we're on 10 months now, like more than 10 months. I don't know. Somebody asked me like, what would you do if this was over right now? And I was like, go to an island. Yeah. Like just get on a plane and fly somewhere warm and sit down for a minute. Just, to see something different. I don't even know, like, but that was what it reminded me of when you said that. Like, sometimes the kids get up, they do something for a couple hours, they go back to sleep again, they get up again. Arden's done school at 12:30 in the afternoon. Like, why are we getting the kids out of bed at 6:30 if nothing matters?
Right.
I don't understand anything. It's just if I sat here and told you the number of television shows I've watched to completion in the last 10 months, it's embarrassing.
That's a lot.
It's embarrassing. Off the top of my head, Friday Night Lights, I've rewatched MASH, MASH was like 11 seasons.
The whole thing?
Yeah, like the whole damn thing. Friday Night Lights. I'm halfway through New Girl now. I just watched a reality show where glass blowers competed in a competition. I loved it. Like, these are not things I would normally watch on television. Now,
have you watched the tattoo one?
No, but I will now that you said it.
It's interesting. I can't remember. I think it's on Netflix.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a whole, I've only watched a couple of them with my husband. But yeah, it's a competition between like the top rated tattoo artists being judged by, one of the judges is some big like music. I can't remember which band he's in.
Tommy Lee. I'm guessing Tommy Lee.
Anyway, some of these tattoos are like
amazing.
Phenomenal, like amazing. But there you go. There's a new one to watch.
The glass blowing, I was like, this is fascinating. Like, I watched Watchmen. I swear I should sit down and make a list. And I'm always doing something else. Like I watch while I'm cooking, or even while I'm working, it's on a different monitor or something like that. I don't
you
really
don't just sit idle and like.
I don't remember the last time I did that, but even that bothers me. Like, it's not that I'm all for like laying around watching television, but nothing. And then I never feel like I'm getting anything accomplished, which is another horrible feeling. And this is bad. Like I want to take my vaccine and I want to go back.
You want to go somewhere.
Yeah. I'm going to get my vaccine. I want to go outside. You know, here in this time, I've taught myself to smoke barbecue, make pizza dough so that I can actually make a pizza like better than the one you would get at a pizza place. I bought an oven to make the pizza dough in because I couldn't get my oven to get hot enough. What else am I going to do? And somebody just bought me like a little beginner drone for Christmas. I'm teaching myself to fly a drone. Why? I have nothing else to do. So I'm trying
to do something with sourdough too.
No, but I think about it.
I thought you had said you did some, or maybe it was a conversation about thinking about it.
I think about it, but there's so much going on that I don't understand about starters and like live yeast and everything. But trust me, this goes on 6 more months. I'm going to teach myself how to build a brick wall next. like, I wonder how do you do this? Like, I don't know what's up. And to top it off before you go, a deer dropped dead next to my house the other day. Like, went up into my land.
Had a heart attack?
I don't know. It went up in my landscaping, laid down under a bush, and died.
Like, you watched it happen?
No. I walked outside, and I was taking down Christmas lights on the patio, and I'm like looking forward, rolling lights up, and I look away, and then I can hear the voice in my head go, was that a deer? Like look again. And I look back, and there was a deer laying under a bush. So now I'm staring at it. That doesn't seem like something I've ever seen before. Huh. That thing's dead. So I go over and I'm like, it's dead. Now what do I do?
And was it still warm when you prodded it?
I don't think it was warm. And so luckily it's been cold outside, or probably we would have noticed it was dead sooner. So I called the township and I'm like, hey, what do I do? And they're like, well, we'll come get it, but we can't come on your property. And I went, what now?
So you had to drag it to the curb?
I almost said to her, I make podcasts. Like, I don't know if you understand who you're talking to right now. So yeah, I had to get a piece of rope, tie it up around its legs, and drag a deer across my front yard out to the side. I don't know what else is going to happen in this pandemic, but I would like it all to end because...
And you don't live any wooded places like they would have gotten... I mean, this isn't deer hunting season, so I can't imagine they got shot and just died under the bush.
Somehow there's a pathway that goes behind all of my neighbors' backyards where they make it from one piece of like woods to a next, and they just walk through. And this one just... I said, my neighbor sees me, humping a deer across my front yard. And he goes, hey, what's up? And I was like, hi. And I said, if this thing would have given up 50 feet sooner, this would be your problem. It's like, because he just made it over the property line. I was like, damn it. Anyway, I felt bad for the deer. Then I had that problem. I was like, oh, this poor thing, But then there was another part of me going, I think they carry ticks. So I'm like, Jenny, who am I? I don't belong in this conversation, Typically
do, but not this time of the year. It's too cold.
How would I know that? How would I even know that? It's ridiculous. All right. You have to go, right?
I do, actually.
Right,
I didn't even realize we were out of time.
That's fine. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. And if you're still here, I want to be completely honest with you. The next couple of minutes are going to be me talking about the advertisers. If you've been wanting to check one of them out, stick around and I'll tell you how to do that. And if you don't, okay, you can go now. But first, let me thank the T1D Exchange and ask you again to consider adding your voice to the work that they're doing. Remember, you want to be a T1 adult or caregiver who's a U.S. resident who has a couple of minutes to answer some simple questions that will go a long way towards helping everyone living with type 1 diabetes. Check them out at t1dexchange.org/juicebox. There's links right there in the show notes of your podcast player. And of course, there's links at juiceboxpodcast.com if you forget how to get there. I also want to thank the rest of the advertisers, even though they don't have any ads on this episode. That's how much I feel good about them. And I'd like you to be able to get to them. So if you're looking for that Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor, if you are using insulin of any kind, if you're a type 1, you're a type 2, go check it out. Dexcom.com/juicebox. And don't forget, if you get your health insurance through the Veterans Administration, the United States Veterans Administration, if you're a vet, I guess that's what I should have said. If you're a U.S. vet, go check them out for sure. I think you might like the coverage that you find. But everyone has an opportunity to get a Dexcom G6 by going to dexcom.com/juicebox. There's a little bit of information you fill out, and Dexcom's going to get back to you. If you want an absolutely terrific blood glucose meter, I suggest looking at the Contour Next one. And you can do that at contournext.com/juicebox. Contour makes an easy to use, incredibly accurate meter that does not take up a lot of space in your pocket or your bag. Arden's been using it for quite some time now. It is easily the most accurate and handy meter she has ever had. What's next? I know. The Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. It is an insulin pump that doesn't have any tubing to get caught on doorknobs. And also, because it doesn't have tubing, you don't have to take it off. It's self-contained. You can swim with it, get involved in all of your favorite activities, take a shower, all the things where tube pumpers would have to disconnect and, likely have their blood sugars go up because of it. With Omnipod, you won't have to. Omnipod would be thrilled to send you out a free, no obligation demo of the Omnipod that you could actually try on and wear to give it a little test drive of your own. It's non-functioning, so don't worry. It's just to get the feel, myomnipod.com/juicebox. Fill out the information, watch the Omnipod demo show up in your mailbox. I'd also like to remind you about Touched by Type 1. It's a diabetes org that does amazing things for people with type 1, and all they want in the whole world is for you to know that they exist. So check them out at touchedbytype1.org. They're also on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, my daughter carries the Gvoke HypoPen with her wherever she goes. Check it out at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Okay, that's it. I have a little bit of time left. I want to thank you for listening, for sharing the show with others. If you're an endocrinologist that recommends this podcast to your patients, hit me up. I'd love to have you on the show. You could even be anonymous if you wanted to. What else? Thank you for the great ratings and reviews that you leave on Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen. And if you're listening online, please find yourself a podcast app. They're free. They're handy. Get in there and subscribe. Subscribe to the Juicebox Podcast. Oh, last thing. It's like the end of January. There's 2 more days left in January. And if it's not January 2021 anymore, you can stop listening now. But if it's still January 2021 and there's like a day or an hour or something left, download a couple of episodes for me, please. I'm right at the edge of a milestone for this month, and I would just try to push a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, go back and find a couple that you were like, oh, I did mean to listen to that one. Download it. Or now's a great time to start with the Diabetes Pro Tip series if you haven't, or the Defining Diabetes series. These are strewn throughout the podcast. I know the Diabetes Pro Tip episodes begin at episode 210. I got to be honest, I don't know where the Defining Diabetes starts, but you can just search it right there in your podcast app. Just Defining Diabetes, and they'll all pop up and you can see them all. I'm just blathering on now. I should hit stop, but I don't even know what I'm going to do for the rest of the night. I think I might watch WandaVision tonight. That is the extent of my Friday evening. There you go. Now you know the excitement. I don't want to get off because I don't have anything left to do. I like talking to you guys. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back next week with more episodes of the Juicebox Podcast.